In this lesson, we are going to apply what we have learned about identifying details within a passage to use as evidence to support a claim or a statement through some questions on IXL. Now, the assignments are going to be a little bit different than what we have been doing with the reading content because we're going to be using some social studies and science content to practice what we have learned. Now, this particular lesson isn't necessarily going to be instructional in the sense of what we have been doing with the reading content. The way that these assignments are presented and these lessons are presented is you are going to work through 2 stages of challenge questions. And what I'm going to do is we will be using some world history content, specifically on the topic of the rise of river civilizations, to really just help show you how to navigate through these questions. So let's go ahead and begin by looking at how the screen will start up once you have logged into IXL and you click on the lesson. So it will start with this Get Started button. Right now, stage 1, it gives instructions to answer 5 out of 6 questions correctly. So successful completion of this challenge will require you to answer 5 of these questions correctly. So let's take what we have learned and see how well we can work through these challenges. All right, let's go ahead and begin with the first challenge question. We are presented some information about 4 key river civilizations in ancient world history. The passage states 4 of the largest ancient civilizations arose along rivers. They are often called ancient river civilizations. Read about each of these 4 ancient river civilizations, then follow the instructions below. So our first civilization is the Old Kingdom Egyptian civilization. It was located in northeastern Africa along the Nile River. Today that area is part of the country of Egypt. The Sumerian civilization was located in ancient Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Today that area is mostly in the country of Iraq. The Harappan civilization was located in South Asia along the Indus River. Today that area is part of the countries of India and Pakistan. The Shang dynasty's civilization was located along the Yellow River, which is also called the Huanghe. The Yellow River flows through East Asia. Today that area is part of the country of China. So we are instructed to label each river civilization on the map. So how do we do this? Well, we need to look at the details presented in the passage that tells us where these civilizations were located. So first, the Old Kingdom Egyptian civilization was located in northeast Africa. Okay, so we know that when we pick the Old Kingdom Egyptian civilization, we need to match it with the area of Africa on the map. The Sumerian was located in ancient Mesopotamia. So if you're like, well, I'm not really sure where that is, well, we know that it is in the modern day country of Iraq. So we know that's going to be located in the Middle Eastern region on the map. The Harappan civilization was located in South Asia, specifically India and Pakistan. So we know it's going to be in the southern part of Asia. And then finally, the Shang dynasty's civilization is located in China. So with that information, let's see if we can identify where these civilizations will be located on a world map. So first, we're just going to start with the left and work right. We have Egypt on the northeastern part of the African continent. We know that that is the Old Kingdom Egyptian civilization. So we're going to drag this to the box pointing to the old Egypt, or pointing to Egypt on the map. Next, we have Iraq, the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, which those are details mentioned from the passage. So we know that is the Sumerian civilization. So we're going to drag that to our box. The third one is located in Pakistan and the northern part of India. So we know that is the Harappan civilization based on details from the text. So we will drag that down here, which leaves us finally, oops, wrong box. And then finally we have China, which is where the Shang dynasty was located. So we will drag it here. So once we have our boxes pulled down to the correct location on the map, we click submit, and then we can move on to the next question. But before we do, after you complete each challenge questions, you're going to be presented with a reading passage. Now, when you get to these, what you are going to do is read the information presented, and in a Google Doc or a private comment in Google Classroom, you are going to write down 2 things that you learned from the passage. So let's practice with this one. So it states, why did civilizations begin on these rivers? There are lots of big rivers in the world, but river civilizations didn't start on all of them. That's because the societies needed rivers. The societies that needed rivers the most were those in regions that got very little rain. In places such as Europe or parts of the Americas, farmers could grow crops without having to rely on the water from rivers. So, in your notes, what you could do is, the first thing that we learn is that the reason why some civilizations formed along rivers is because societies needed the rivers in areas or in regions that got very little rain. So we could say civilizations formed around rivers in areas that received very little rain. Well, let's think about that for a moment. Why is that important? Well, in order for a civilization to form and thrive, the basic necessities for people need to be met. Shelter, clothing, food, and water. So these regions that didn't receive very much rain, they needed to be able to have a reliable water source, which was provided by these rivers. And they could use those to help them grow crops, of course provide drinking water, since water is one of the basic necessities for human life to thrive. The next point that we could say that we learned is what I just touched on. Farmers could grow crops without having to rely on the water from rivers. So What that is saying is that there are areas that did get lots of rain, so farmers could rely on that rain to provide crops. But in these river civilizations, we can say that farmers needed water from rivers to grow crops. So again, after you answer each question, you're going to be presented with some information that ties into the challenge that you just completed. For each of those, read those passages and just jot down at least 2 to 3 things that you learned from that passage. You will put that in a Google document or a private comment in Google Classroom and submit that with your assignment. So let's go ahead and move on to the next challenge question. The Sumerian civilization was located in ancient Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Today, that area is mostly in the country of Iraq. And we have on our map this dark green section that is showing where the Sumerian civilization was located. Let's continue reading. Each ancient river civilization developed its own written language. Sumerian writing is called cuneiform. Cuneiform writing originally looked like pictures of the things that it was describing. Sumerian writing was developed to help record the buying and selling of goods such as grain. The image on the left is a cuneiform text that records a grain sale. The image on the right is a photo of grain. Look at the images and then answer the question below. So we're asked to look at this image, which is the cuneiform writing that was used to record this grain sale. And it shows us a picture of what grain looks like. Now, based on the photo of grain above, which of the following pictures shows the symbol for grain on the cuneiform text? Well, if we look at the 3 images presented here, and we look at the picture of grain, if you notice, it looks like little kernels in the center of the grain. And in this picture, we see something that resembles those kernels in the grain. So of the 3, this picture is the one that is used in cuneiform to represent grain on this tablet. All right, once again, we have a passage of information presented to us that talks a little bit more about Sumerian writing. How did Sumerians write? The word cuneiform is actually a Greek word that means wedge-shaped. This word is used to describe Sumerian writing because the symbols were made by pressing or cutting small wedges into a tablet. Scribes, or people who copied and wrote texts, most often wrote on clay tablets. When the clay was soft, the scribe pressed the end of a reed into the clay to make the wedges. Scribes could also write in stone, but writing in stone was much more difficult because the scribe had to use a sharp tool to chisel each little shape. And here we have an illustration of a scribe who is writing on a clay tablet. Now, once again, once you read the passage, you're going to take notes on 2 or 3 things that you learned from it. Let's go on to the next question. The Old Kingdom Egyptian civilization was located in northeastern Africa along the Nile River. Today, that area is part of the country of Egypt. The ancient Egyptian Old Kingdom developed a written language around 3000 BCE, which stands for before the Common Era. Old Kingdom Egyptians had 2 different types of writing. Hieroglyphs The word hieroglyphs means sacred writing. In Greek, hieroglyphs were mainly used to write on monuments or other stone objects. Hieratic was much easier to write than hieroglyphics. It was used to write documents for daily life, such as business deals. Hieratic was usually written with ink on papyrus, which is similar to paper. So using the information above, match each type of Egyptian writing to its image. Now, what we are asked to do is use the details describing the difference between hieroglyphs and hieratic writing and match them with what we see in these images. So what are some details about hieroglyphs? So hieroglyphs, according to the information presented, were used to write on monuments or other stone objects. Hieratic, on the other hand, was written with ink on papyrus, which is similar to paper. Now, if we look at the first image right here, we can tell that this is clearly paper or a paper-like substance. We also see that the writing appears to be written in ink. So based on details from the passage, evidence from what we've read, we know that hieratic writing was written on paper with ink. The other image is obviously stone, and it looks like these symbols were carved into the stone, so we know that that is how hieroglyphics were written. So our evidence from the passage points us to this being an example of hieroglyphics. So we're going to match hieratic with this document and hieroglyphs with the image of this monument. Now, this question, of course, is set up in a more familiar way. We've already encountered these type of questions in our reading passages on earlier assignments in the module. Let's take a look at the information presented. The Harappan civilization was located in South Asia along the Indus River. Once again, we have our map. The dark green represents the Harappan civilization. Today, that area is part of the countries of India and Pakistan. So we're asked to read the passage about Harappan writing, then select the sentence that explains why historians think that Harappan writing was mainly used for trade. Parts of Harappan writing are still a mystery to historians because no one has been able to translate the Harappan language. Almost all Harappan writing has been found on seals used by Harappan merchants to show that their goods were brand new. A seal is a small carved stone object that is meant to stamp an image into soft material such as clay. Harappan seals are often illustrated with images of animals. Now, which statement provides the best evidence that Harappan writing was mainly used for trade? If we look at the second sentence, almost all Harappan writing has been found on seals used by Harappan merchants to show that their goods were brand new. Okay, so how does that tell us that it's used for trade? Well, if we think about trade in the historical sense, that means an exchange of goods. Trade in the ancient world could mean I have grain, you have precious jewels. I want to trade my grain for your precious jewels, so that exchange would be made. What in the passage clues us in that this is talking about an exchange of goods? Well, we know that Harappan merchants. These are the business people who provide the goods and sell the goods. Said they would use these seals to show that their goods were brand new. So the goods that they had to offer says they were brand new. So the language within this sentence leads us to believe that this is in reference to trade or an exchange of goods. So, based on that evidence, we can support the claim that Harappan writing was primarily used for trade. The Shang Dynasty civilization was located along the Yellow River, which is also called the Huanghe. The Yellow River flows through East Asia. Today, that area is part of the country of China. The earliest evidence of writing in the Yellow River Valley comes from the Shang Dynasty. Shang Dynasty writing is found on ox bones and turtle shells. These bones and shells are called oracle bones. Oracle bones were used for a special purpose during the Shang Dynasty. Read two oracle bone texts, then answer the questions below. Okay, so our oracle bone text translations are, "This night it will not rain, and this season the king will gather 5,000 men to fight against a neighboring tribe." So, based on these texts, what we are looking at specifically is the oracle bone text translation. So this is where we need to focus to answer this question. So based on these texts, what was the main use of writing during the Shang Dynasty? Now, in this particular question, it's going to require us to make an inference based on the information that's presented. So our options are to record the Shang Dynasty family tree, to record long poems or stories, to remember important military victories, or to tell events that will happen in the future. To answer this question, let's look carefully at what the text translations actually say. This night it will not rain. Okay, our key word is will. So we're making a proclamation of something that is or is not going to happen. The next statement, this season the king will gather 5,000 men to fight against a neighboring tribe. Once again, we're making a proclamation about something that has not happened yet, but will happen or won't happen. When we make those proclamations, what are we talking about? We are talking about the future. Based on evidence, we can infer that the main use of writing during the Shang Dynasty is our last answer choice, to tell events that will happen in the future. So that is our best inference based on the information presented. If we look at the others, just to quickly rule those out to make sure, to record the Shang Dynasty family tree, nothing in the oracle bone text talk about the dynasty's family tree, so we know that is not correct. To record long poems or stories, I've read poems, I've read stories, I've never seen one that is only one sentence long, so we know that is not correct. To remember important military victories. Well, the first one has nothing to do with the military, so there's no real way that it will match that particular claim. The second one says the king will gather 5,000 men to fight against a neighboring tribe. So this is talking about a military action, but it's saying that they will gather. It hasn't happened yet, but they're going to. There's nothing in there talking about them being victorious. It's just saying what they're going to do. So we know the third option is not correct. So to tell events that will happen in the future is the best inference. Let's take a look at one last question and see if we can successfully complete at least our first stage of the challenge. Each of the 4 river civilizations invented their own form of writing, but historians believe each civilization invented writing for different reasons. The table below shows text from each ancient civilization match the text to its purpose. So we are given an excerpt from a text from each river civilization, and we are going to determine which one best describes the given purpose. So, let's look at our first text, a Sumerian cuneiform text that records the sale of 3 sheep. Which purpose best matches that? Our first option is records information about religious beliefs. There's nothing in there that mentions anything about religion, so we know that that is not correct. Tries to tell the future. Well, it's describing a sale of 3 sheep, which means something that happened in the present or maybe even in the past or the recent past, so it doesn't have anything to do with the future. Helps keep track of goods that were bought and sold. And then our other one shows buyers that goods for sale haven't been opened. Well, that really doesn't match with sale of sheep, but Sumerian cuneiform does seem to be, it says that it's a record of the sale, so it helps keep track of goods that were bought and sold. In other words, it's a record of goods. So our purpose for Sumerian text is to keep track of goods that were bought and sold. Next, a Harappan seal with writing on it that is attached to a jar of grain. Well, our other option that deals with buying and selling goods says shows buyers that goods for sale haven't been opened. Okay, so it says a Harappan seal. All right, we learned in an earlier passage that the Harappans would use a seal to show that it was an unopened good. So we know that the purpose of Harappan text was to show buyers that goods for sale haven't been opened. Our third text, an ancient Egyptian text about gods that is written on the walls of a temple. Okay, so gods and temple are key words. When we think in terms of gods and temple, those are religious beliefs. So, Egyptian text records information about religious beliefs. And then finally, an oracle bone from the Shang dynasty that says the Shang army will be attacked. So we just discussed that in our previous question. Oracle bones try to tell the future. Now that we have successfully completed the first challenge, to continue on with the assignment, you are going to answer 6 additional questions that require you to get 5 correct to complete stage 2 of the challenge. Once that is completed, at the end, you will have 3 bonus questions to help boost your score. So, let's say, for example, you were not able to answer 5 questions in each challenge. Let's say you were only able to answer 4 correctly in challenge 1 and you did get 5 correct in challenge 2. The bonus questions give you an opportunity to increase your overall score to successfully complete the whole challenge. So to complete this assignment, you will go through stage 1 and stage 2 of these challenge questions, answer your bonus questions, and at the end it will give you your SMART score. Successful completion of this challenge assignment is going to require you to have a SMART score of 80 or higher. So you will have a series of informational texts using historical writings as well as scientific writings to practice identifying details to complete these challenges. In order to successfully complete the entire assignment, you will need a SMART score of 80 on each challenge. So that concludes this introduction to how to complete these particular assignments, and I wish you the best of luck. If you have any questions or you get stuck on an assignment, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You can give me a call, shoot me an email. We can set up a Google Meet session for me to work with you through those, or we can set up a phone conference as well. So I wish you luck and Godspeed.